Polkadot can achieve a throughput at a level whilst again maintaining shared security not seen anywhere else in the space. What engineers at Parity and the Fellowship are focusing on for the existing Polkadot 1 and whatever is left of it to deliver this like leftover features and make it simpler, make it easier to use. Like for example, we made a lot of things configurable 4 years ago, thinking people are going to build rocket ships, but it turns out most people want a bicycle, you know, like this kind of things. So
well, I want a rocket ship as well. I mean, do I have to choose?
No. That's a great thing. We can always build the rocket ship, but this is a mistake we should not repeat in chat. We gave everyone the blueprint to build a rocket ship before asking them, do you want a bicycle or a rocket? That's
okay. All right, thank you for tuning into another episode of the TEACHMEDEFI podcast. I'm very excited today because I got Kian here from Parity. Hi, Kian. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Right. So you've been working, I correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've been working on Polkadot pretty much since the start. That's what my takeaway was when you were in the space with Arash on X. Is that correct?
Yeah, the idea, of course, was around, I joined in 2019, started working for Parity. Late 2019, Kusama was launched, and mid-2020, Polkadot was launched. So I'm lucky enough that I saw the launch of both. But also, admittedly, at the same time, I was pretty junior at the time, so I had little baby contributions here and there. Right. But I guess if just like the genesis counts, I've been around to see the genesis of both being launched, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far. A little over 5 years, or 5.5 almost.
Right. So you've seen it all pretty much. So I thought it would be fitting for today to kind of perhaps go through the past, the present, and the future of Polkadot, to put everything a bit into perspective. Also, maybe to clear things up for viewers and listeners. Perhaps to put that in context, I was at the crypto conference this week, and Multiverse X was presenting there. I think opened the conference basically, and they had this like large announcement, sort of, that they will be doing something new or changing something about their technical infrastructure, and then they presented basically sovereign chains. Right? They said sovereign chains, interoperable, and things like that. So I couldn't help but think of Polkadot and how Polkadot has implemented this like years ago, as far as I know. So, and that just reminded me of somewhat of the knowledge gap sometimes in the space, and other projects kind of starting to take on narratives, which have been technically implemented by Polkadot for a long time ago. But these other projects kind of coming in and taking these narratives and perhaps more effectively sending them out into the market and pushing them and kind of, taking kind of the wind out of the sails of the project that actually did the thing initially. Feels like it sometimes. So I thought maybe today we can talk about, the story and the present, and even the exciting stuff that's coming up.
Yeah. A very timely conversation to be had, to be honest. I'm in my spare time, or sometimes idle time, I'm, as we speak exactly, thinking of what I have seen in Polkadot in the last 5.5 years, and trying to exactly come up with a narrative of what has happened so far and where is this going next. Exactly for the reasons you mentioned, as an aid to prevent any misunderstanding or lack of understanding. The misunderstanding could be that, the audience or developers might not know where this tech is going, or misunderstand that, for example, Jam is something that is going to like abolish everything that exists and replace it, which is really not the case. Sort of the narrative being repurposed by others in better way. I think it's for all good reasons, or all good reasons to have such conversations.
Perhaps, what's your story first? I might be particularly curious, here, because we both have a Persian background. We just tried to speak Farsi. You were much more successful than me at it. Perhaps I'm better at the German part. I learned. But yeah, just tell me about yourself, and like, how did you get to where you are today?
So as of myself, I was doing a master's degree in Amsterdam in the year 2017 and 18, and by early 2019 I was almost done with it, but I wanted a change. I wanted like to start a new endeavor. My degree was titled Parallel and Distributed Computer Systems. So it resonates a lot at a technological level with blockchains as like this massively permissionless distributed systems.
Mm.
Um, Admittedly, I had very little experience with blockchain beforehand, actually. I've done a little bit of playing around with Solidity around the same time, maybe a year before. But as I was looking to my right and left to find this next endeavor and stumbled upon Parity at the time, I felt quite intimidated in that, okay, I have like almost no experience in Rust as a programming language and almost no
Mm.
experience in blockchains together, but let's give it a try. And I mean, I'm very grateful that it worked out, as in I was given the opportunity, but also worked hard myself. So I eventually, over the course of like, I don't know, a year or two, I managed to find myself in a position where I have learned the knowledge that I needed to learn, and I started to feel okay. I'm actually contributing to this thing right now, which is
Mm.
why I mentioned like with the launch of Kusama in late 2019, it was all very new to me. Like I kind of it's but it also makes it kind of interesting. A funny
Yeah.
story, I'm part of like the Kusama society, so I have a tattoo of the Kusama Genesis hash on my body. But because of this story, it kind of means a lot to me in that sense as well, because really the year
Yeah.
2019 was like full of new things for me, and really a big part of it was this starting this exotic career at Parity, Web3, Polkadot, Kusama, like all was very, very exotic for me at the time. And then I think for the first couple of years that I was working in Polkadot, I was highly associated with the staking system. The proof of stake system of Polkadot, not at the like core protocol layer, but more like at the top application layer, how people stake, receive their rewards, nominate. I mean, now we have these pools, and we worked on the dashboard, these kind of things. For the
Mm.
first few years, I was highly focused on these areas. Eventually, I think with experience, a somewhat of a natural transition occurs that you find yourself in an area where you're focusing less on one particular thing, but it spreads out. So nowadays I'm leading the frame team at Parity, still supervising the staking stuff, but also like doing a lot of education, because I think that's something I can do well, helping with like narratives, like many random things, to be honest.
Mm.
Like it's hard to put it into one category or one title. Like I'm these days it's really like on a not day to day but week by week basis, I think to myself, okay, what can I do that is the most useful and I'm good at doing it, and this could be very different at times. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of my story with Polkadot.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, so basically now you're fighting on a lot of fronts. You're fighting a lot of battles now. Wherever you're needed, you kind of try and contribute. Is that correct?
more fronts, yes, indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. And interestingly, you learn the opposite as well. At some point, you learn, okay, you really need to narrow it down. Like you can't fight all battles. Like I learned the hard way to also manage that, but it's still different from how I was working in, I don't know, 2021, 2022, where I was really had the sort of the mm, I wouldn't call it freedom, because I'm also free to do that now. But at the time, I thought the most useful thing that I could do is that focus on one thing. Whereas now, I actually
Yeah.
think the most useful thing I can do is to focus on more things at a shallower depth. So or a good example is that I find myself in this situation. You take the first few steps, and then you
Mm.
help someone else do the rest of the work. So you kind of like explore,
Mm.
see if an idea is feasible, see if it's actually useful, and then you work with others, you delegate, and so
Mm.
on.
Right. And what was it? What was it like for Polkadot then? Like, what was Polkadot when it started? What was like the vision? I mean, obviously, we know now modularity has become sort of like a one of those narratives in the market, right? But I believe Polkadot saw that already, like back in the day. And so, just tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So I think especially with Polkadot One, as in the official thing that launched, it was highly around like the also my understanding of it highly around like the multi-chain future, as in like we would need to have multiple blockchains to serve the needs of different applications, and it did really deliver on that in a good way. As we have seen, it kind of did maybe a too good of a job in some sense in delivering that. I really think the main, it's hard to call it the main, but one of the
Yeah.
main really novel and unique things that Polkadot delivered in its version 1 was proper execution sharding, the original vision of Ethereum 2 that never came around. Like in that, not only your data is being sharded across different shards, but also execution is sharded as well, and security is still shared between everyone. This is an architecture that is still, as far as I know, not. I don't see it anywhere else other than Polkadot, and you can really explain. It's a very good explanation to also explain what Polkadot is, why it has chosen the decisions that it has taken so far, that it has chosen so far. So yeah, we started with this, or the Polkadot one narrative was highly around like we're going to create a sharded blockchain, let's call it Polkadot, and then we're going to put one blockchain on each of these shards, and we're going to give these shards to these blockchains at 6 months at a time. This is basically the auction model that existed in Polkadot one. And once you, and again, before going further, I really want to emphasize that there is this architecture is already very similar to what we see today in Ethereum with the rollups, right? Ethereum based chain is like the Polkadot. These rollups are like the parachains, right? And because and there is no sort of that auctioning thing doesn't really exist, and there's a good reason for it, because that shared security layer kind of doesn't exist. Like if you want to spin a new rollup on Ethereum, it's great. Like you just put your contract there. Hopefully you have some kind of dispute resolution, and if there's like it's secure and so on. There's not like a multi-sig in between managing all the security aspects for you, but it's pretty permissionless, and that's great. Honestly, it's a trade-off, right? Like it's a trade-off where if you don't want to have shared security, you also don't need any barriers to entry, because there's very little resources to fight over. The only thing that rollups need to fight about is this space where they put their evidence, which used to be in the call data, which was quite expensive. And now Ethereum has actually improved it significantly, as far as I know. When with this like blob space, they can cheaply put their data. But still, there is little competition there. It's very free because the system doesn't give you much. Whilst what Polkadot has done, even in that Polkadot 1 model, is that these shards, rollups, parachains, whatever you want to call them, their execution is being shared among Polkadot validators while the security is actually maintained. And there's like how this is achieved, it's beyond my head to also explain, but there's like great articles around it on the Web3 Foundation research. I think one of the co-founders of Polkadot has done a lot of good blog posts on this, like how the Polkadot parachain protocol achieves perfect execution sharding and shared security, like the two together. That's really the key of the system there. Yeah. So the system is already like in this sense kind of similar to what Ethereum has. And then what is now Polkadot doing as a next step is to allow these. We first start with this definition. We call any of these units of computation that can ingest a parachain and progress it a core. And then we abolish that notion of like, we're going to give you 6 months of this core and go do whatever you want with it. It's all about simplifying that. So a lot of the ideas that is now being dubbed Polkadot 2.0, like agile core time, on-demand parachains, so on and so forth, is all about like relaxing that. Okay, you want a core for one block, here you go, you have it. Similarly, I compressed a lot of information here, but I'm going to wrap it up very soon, and we can unpack it together. Even I can already give a very high-level introduction of what Jam is. Jam is one of the ideas of Jam, not the only one, but one is merely that let's allow applications beyond parachains to utilize cores. Like if you just want to have an application that's not even a blockchain. So yeah, I think, let me recap quickly. I think a very good understanding of Polkadot goes to deeply understanding shared security and sharded execution, which is the two pieces of Polkadot's architecture, and then the rest is spreading from there. And the main narrative now, one more last bit here. The main differentiating factor now between like what I see in Polkadot and what I see in the Ethereum space or the Cosmos space is still this argument of whether shared security is worth it or not. And I think that's really the main question here to be asked. If shared security is not necessary, admittedly, there is there's a good argument that possibly as a design like the Ethereum rollup space where there's no shared security is better. But if you think shared security is necessary, then it's a very different story.
Okay, that's an interesting framing you gave it. So, what's your take? Is shared security important? Are you basically saying it might be like an over engineering if the other thing is enough and it's easier to implement?
Okay, interesting question. I think I would not be working, I guess, on this tech if I didn't believe that.
Yeah.
But it's good to challenge oneself on that. So it kind of goes back to when you shard a system, and then you have the decision tree is as, okay, I'm sharding the system. Do I want to have this shared security or not? And when if you want, it's a Polkadot model. If you don't, it's like the Ethereum rollup model, where rollups only spread their execution back to the base chain when there's a conflict, if done properly. I mean, there's this website L2Beat. I think except for one, literally none of the Ethereum rollups do proper conflict resolution. So it's kind of being YOLO'd all at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I think
Yeah.
it is the reality. So you have sharding. If those shards are homogeneous, as in you know what application is running on that shard. You know it's not going to change. It's not really sovereign. It's something that you know. It's static and you can trust. I think then the argument for needing shared security is less, because the problem with lack of shared security is that if two shards want to talk to each other, in the Polkadot case, two parachains want to talk to each other. In the Ethereum case, two L2s want to talk to each other. How can they, if they are actually sovereign, how can they trust that the other side is, not tricking them or is not going rogue or these problems? So Polkadot from day zero was heterogeneous sharding, in that different shards, different parachains were completely sovereign, and they could change, they could upgrade themselves the same way that Polkadot could upgrade themselves. Therefore, it seemed unnegotiable that you need shared security such that when parachains want to talk to each other, they can have a much higher degree of trust between one another, and that they can know that, okay, the other parachain is, I don't know, this parachain A. Its code is this, and Polkadot is guaranteeing that that is the code, that is the execution of that other rollup, that other parachain. Whereas in the rollup space, especially again with the lack of these proper conflict resolution, or I think that the actual word is not conflict resolution. Sorry, I'm not using the right one. It's something else.
Dispute? Well, it's the
Dispute.
same, or?
Dispute. Yeah, I mean it's kind of analogous, but yeah, the disputes.
Mm.
Without proper disputes, when you send some value bearing tokens from one rollup to another, you're basically crossing your finger, hoping the other rollup is benevolent enough not to screw you in the
Right.
future. So again, especially when there's sovereignty involved, there's heterogeneity involved, and there's value bearing interactions, I think shared security is utmost important.
Wow. Okay. So when we look at the roll up in layer 2 space, I mean, intuitively, I think you already know, even if you're not like a dev, that interoperability is a problem. Like with all the bridges and that whole thing, it seems to be quite bothersome and not good user experience. So would you say this could be actually a problem in the current state of the Ethereum ecosystem, this kind of like um, lack of basis where you can kind of trust another roll up? um, is perhaps Eigenlayer this approach now to bring some sort of shared security that could fix this up, or what's your take?
Um, I mean, I think Eigenlayer is a great idea. It's a risky but reasonable leverage of economic security that already exists. I think if you want to really be conservative, you can always say any type of like it's like economic leverage or something. Like as in we have something at stake. We're using it to generate economic security. Now let's do more things with that economic security, which is, yeah, again, as I said, great, a little bit risky, but it's a decision that any ecosystem can take to implement. But I don't think it changes anything about the base architecture of these systems. In that, again, let me give you this example. It might help. As in Ethereum validators, never, ever, ever, unless if there's this dispute stuff done properly, under under conditions other than disputes, recheck or bother to re-execute any of these rollup state transition. If a rollup says I'm this and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, it's like, good, we trust you, it's good. Again, unless and with this like dispute implementation, this can be improved, but as I said, as far as I know, this is far from reality right now. Whereas in the shared security model, a subset of Polkadot validators are always constantly rechecking all the state transition of all of these rollups. So it's kind of like pessimistic rollups in that sense. So again, like something like restaking Eigenlayer doesn't change this fundamental difference. It's really at the core protocol layer.
Right. So yeah, I mean, you kind of hear the theme of trust again here. So we are trying to build trustless systems, but
Yes,
just how they have evolved, in some ways, the need to trust has entered the systems again, or at least how Ethereum is evolving. So in Polkadot, you're saying this is kind of like from the core has been something thought about, that the blockchain can evolve and still maintain this element of, I don't have to trust other parties here to have a value exchange with them. I can trust the system.
precisely. Although in this case, system, there is this like arguments often used against Polkadot, which I don't want to like hide here. In that case, system is Polkadot, as in you do have to trust Polkadot. But then this takes us back to another argument in this space. I'm happy to open that can of worm for you as well, which is called stake fragmentation. As in, if we, so Polkadot is kind of like the NATO. If we want to see it, is like you trust this one thing such that then you don't have to trust anyone else. This one thing ensures everything else is working properly. So in that sense, it's kind of like a NATO system. And it takes us back to stake fragmentation, because if we acknowledge that proof of stake is the future, is the way to go, it is unfortunately necessary, or it's unavoidable to create this one place where all the economic security of an ecosystem is aggregated, and this is the point where all the trust is being generated, and then you don't need to trust anyone else. So in that sense, the existence of Polkadot Relay Chain, or in the future Jam Chain, something along those lines, is somewhat necessary, and it would be this one place that you have to trust, or you will trust. But it's again it's not like a blind trust. Again, it's like any other blockchain, let's say, where the code is public, the protocol is like, and also on those fronts, like these social fronts. Honestly, I think Polkadot is doing. Honestly, like these days, I'm feeling ever more somewhat proud, even, I would say, as in like the governance on chain is really like truly working in the way that it was intended. There's this fellowship that's running all the show with runtime upgrades and stuff. Parity is less and less the bottleneck. So as much as some of these solutions might slow us down short term, we're actually doing all the right things. So it's somewhat of a joyful time to see all of this in the Polkadot space. If anything, you mentioned Eigenlayer. I actually wanted to say this. This is an interesting analogy. I haven't thought about it before. So as I said, stake fragmentation is an issue. Like generally speaking, with proof of stake systems, what you want to do is like aggregate the economic security in one place and use it for as many things as you can. In some sense, I would say the economic security of Ethereum-based chain is actually not being utilized in a perfect sense, and that's actually why something like Eigenlayer is trying to fix that in a off-protocol manner. Whereas Polkadot again is already doing that. The economic security that's securing the Polkadot relay chain is already being given to all these parachains as well. So that's another way to look at the same situation again. So in economically secure systems, you want to reuse it to a reasonable extent, which is why, again, Eigenlayer exists in Ethereum, and which is why Polkadot is already doing it at the protocol layer. But again, it's questionable for me what you can achieve outside of the core protocol, because again, it's not Eigenlayer is something outside of Ethereum. It's being done on top of Ethereum. Ethereum validators are not going to know Eigenlayer. They just see some contracts exist and they're going to blindly execute them. One of them is this Eigenlayer contract, and hopefully it's doing what it's supposed to go. At the core protocol layer, these property is missing.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like trying to patch up the shortcomings that are there. Do you think it
Yes.
would be different if Ethereum would have been designed to be upgradable without forks, like that you could just, like, I don't know, would that have changed anything?
Possibly, possibly. I mean, it depends on the boundary where you can upgrade things forklessly. In Polkadot-based chain, there's a big chunk of the protocol that can be forklessly upgraded. Not everything. I think that's also a good misconception to um, remove, but it would have helped indeed.
Mm.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting that to the extent that I know, the founder of Polkadot, Gavin Wood, has really brought all the things that he had wished to see on Ethereum to Polkadot. So I think really one of them was this native upgradability through a meta protocol like the WebAssembly upgrading path that Polkadot has, the governance, and again, most notably, the multi-core blockchain. A blockchain that is
Mm.
properly multi-core,
Mm. Like
whilst
a
not
computer.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the best actually point to then segue it into then the future of Polkadot, and talk a
Right.
little
Yeah.
bit about Jam and where that's going to take us.
Yeah. Let's
Um,
do it. Let's try to make it accessible to people who don't understand this stuff deeply or haven't dived into it.
yeah. I want to start with removing some misconceptions about Jam or things that I think are common mistakes. A is that it's going to replace like the existing Polkadot and Parachain model. False. So that's as in replace. Like it's not going to like all in one drop in replace the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be a new alternative to the Polkadot relay chain, and the parachains that run on top of the relay chain will continue to exist.
Mhm.
Um, a little bit more in the actual terms, um, Jam wishes to allow Polkadot cores to execute very general pieces of software. So we no longer
Mhm.
call them parachain. I alluded to this earlier as well. In the Jam model, they're called just services. Very general
Okay.
term, right? Like what's a service? Something that happens. A
Yeah.
service is executed in the core. That's the thing that happens on Jam. The
Yeah.
first service that would exist on Jam is one that is currently being called Core Chains. It's the service that runs parachains. So
Right.
the first service that Jam will natively provide is actually the backwards compatibility, as in all the parachains would continue to exist.
Mhm.
And
So
then
still with their own rules, they work their own
it,
way, app
it,
specific chains, this kind of thing.
all of it. Like
Mhm.
I'll put it this way: if the Polkadot Fellowship also includes me, so I'm putting work on my shoulder, does their job properly, the end users would not notice this change. Parachains would also not even notice that this change has happened. That's the
Right.
extent where things will not change.
Yeah.
I mean, if done again, like there's probably going to be like this one-off migration, maybe for a couple of hours. Network's going to be like limited, congested, whatever. But again,
Yeah.
like from the perspective of Parachain, what do they do right now? They use like a SDK called Frame and Substrate, and they build a blockchain, and then they go through some process to run this blockchain. The development part is the same. Possibly even the deployment part would be the same. I'm pretty sure we would continue to see the same model of like agile core time, where you can buy, you can purchase one block at a time or up to 28 days, and so on. All of that would remain.
Right.
And a little bit more high level again, like for an end user, just like we're holding dots, maybe doing some staking. Even I would say even more confidently, no change would happen.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they don't have to worry about their dot once the network changes to
No,
Jam. Like
no,
everything's fine. Yeah.
no. If done properly, again, Jam is like an evolution of the Polkadot relay chain.
Hmm.
And the Polkadot relay chain, admittedly, is not doing much in itself, right? Like all the business, all the applications on these parachains, and Jam would still run parachains, so everything would continue to exist.
I'm just thinking if we can find analogies for this to make it accessible to people. So with Jam, perhaps is there any way to put it in the terms of the computer? Because we said like multi cores is a similar thing. Perhaps like applications running on a computer, like there you can run large ones on there or just small ones. I'm not sure if that fits flexibility that Jam would bring, for example.
Polkadot
Right.
is already this multi-core processor. It has like a couple of hundreds of cores, and you can put software on these cores. At the moment, there's limitations to this in that you can put the same. You can say, okay, I'm going to put this one software on one core for the next 2 years, and that's done. There's nothing else you can do.
Right.
This is improving a little bit in the sense that now you can say, I'm putting this software in this core for the next 2 blocks, 1 block. But crucially, these softwares so far have to adhere to a very specific model in that they have to be a blockchain. They have to operate in this model of you receive transactions, you do some update on them, you have some state, you have blocks. They have to adhere to all of these standards. As we're moving toward Jam, we maintain that first property in that what software goes to which core remains extremely fluid. Like you can decide on the spot, like based on need or based on demand and so on. And moreover, the type of these softwares becomes way more general.
Hey there, just a quick message. If you're watching this and you're enjoying it, please make sure to tell a friend that might also like it, because we don't run any ads on this podcast and that helps us out a lot to keep doing this. Thank you. There was this tweet recently, and you commented on it. There was something we had shared from that conference based on that presentation about the sovereign chains, and then someone had tweeted that Polkadot is becoming homogeneous or something like that. Basically, that sounded like it would abolish the kind of parachain system where you can have all these different softwares running on their own cores and with their own rules, like all these blockchains that can communicate with each other and be sovereign. Is that correct or is that wrong? Maybe we should clear that up.
No. I know where that's coming from. So
Yeah.
again, like the parachain model and the parachain stuff is not going anywhere. The reason I think that misconception is coming on is that one of the ideas that's floating around, and it's a great idea, it's good, is that let's run smart contracts directly on Polkadot. And then everyone's like, Polkadot realized after 4 years they should have done Ethereum already. Like, as in, it feels like a step back, which is, again, really, really not the case, because Polkadot is really like, it's like Ethereum 2. It's not like the existing Ethereum 2. Yes, in some sense, a subset of what Polkadot can achieve now is what Ethereum wanted to be at the original 2.0 level, which was, again, this execution sharded situation. Because let me give you this example. I hope it'll be sort of conveyable through audio. I mean, ideally, I would wish if I had like a piece of paper and a visualization around this, but
Right.
I'll do my best to just talk about it. Let's think about it this way. Let's say we developed a service necessary to run smart contracts directly on Polkadot on these cores. How would that be different from what Ethereum is doing? Precisely. What Ethereum does now, ignoring all the rollups, and this was the thing that I was talking about recently on Twitter. What Ethereum does now is that there is an infinite pool of contracts on every block, depending on who's paying to who's willing to pay which fee and whatever. A subset of these contracts kind of get activated. They are like, okay, these are the contracts that people are interacting with, and all Ethereum validators execute them. Everyone's just like whoosh all at the same time. There is no sharding at that level, which is exactly what we know of Ethereum, because Ethereum at the core Ethereum level has no particular type of parallelization or sharding in place. And this is also why Ethereum base layer is so expensive, or can easily get so expensive, because it doesn't have these scalability measures. Contracts on Polkadot, by contrast, how they would look is that there is this very big pool of contracts somewhere, right. And a subset of them is selected and given to each core, and different cores are doing different things. And which subsets you give to which core, you can be very elegant about and give contracts that want to interact with one another So they can synchronously, like they can quickly communicate with each other. You pass them to one core, but the neighboring core is doing something entirely different. It could be actually running not contracts, it could be running the parachain stuff. And the
Right.
neighboring core, after the one afterward, could actually again be running a different subset of contracts. So in this sense, again, a system like Ethereum is not even sharded, so the conversation of sharding is really not in there. But the misconception, I think, in that tweet was that Polkadot is throwing away the heterogeneous sharding stuff, which is absolutely not the case. Because even in this model, where let's imagine all Polkadot cores are used to run contracts, smart contracts, make it even simpler, Solidity contracts, which is not the design that it's probably going to happen. Different cores would still be executing different subset of contracts. So you can do a lot more. You can do like 500 times more than what Ethereum can do suddenly. And you can, again, as I said, elegantly group contracts that talk a lot to each other, such that you increase your throughput, but you don't increase latency. You contracts that talk to each other a lot are still in the same core. They can quickly pass data back and forth. So just very different systems, very different
Yeah.
systems.
Pretty mind-blowing. So can you tell me what the consequence of this will be? Like, I assume higher throughput, so more people love to talk about transactions per second and stuff. Like, just what does that enable? Just to make it a bit tangible. Why?
Yeah.
And is that like, is that groundbreaking in terms of when you look at the rest of the crypto space?
I'm less sure about that. Not in that I don't think it would be groundbreaking, but truth is I don't build a lot of applications on top of this stuff. So I admittedly don't have the vision of what is lacking and therefore what could improve it. If anything, that's a reflection that I have on a personal level. Like I would wish to know these things a little bit better. But sort of without having this confidence, I would still say, so throughput for sure. It would be like Polkadot can achieve a throughput at a level whilst again maintaining shared security, not seen anywhere else in this space, and that's an achievement to consider. Beyond that, what I imagine is that freeing applications or freeing entrepreneurs from deploying Web3 applications in this blockchain model could also open many doors. But this is where I'm saying my confidence level is not like, because I have not done this myself, right? I've built these protocols. I have rarely built application on top of them. But this is my speculation. I think,
Right.
as I mentioned, Jam doesn't. It's not limited anymore to parallel blockchains. It's parallel work, parallel services. So it's very more. It's a lot more general. So as a software engineer who wants to write something and deploy it on Jam, you are now much more free. You don't have to design a blockchain. You can write a much more general piece of code and just put it in there. And that might open a lot of doors. Finally, this is one thing I wanted to mention in that list of misconceptions, but I would add it here, is that what would this mean for an existing parachain team that is going to be migrated over? So what I think would happen is that I believe most teams that have already built parachains, they have had good reasons and they should remain a blockchain. As in, if they have reasons to now migrate to not be a parachain, it probably means they made a wrong decision to begin with. They shouldn't have been a parachain at the beginning anyway. But what Jam enables is that a lot more doors now open to existing parachains, because these parachains can now interoperate with other native Jam services that we cannot yet foresee. So the way I would put it, and I've been sharing it recently, is that no door is being closed, only new doors are being opened. But what exactly people are going to do with that, it's hard for me to imagine yet as well.
Right. But it opens up doors for basically, like, with blockchains, you kind of are creating permissionless networks, and they're kind of like two-sided markets as well. You have developers on one side and users on the other side. And ideally, you'll create a network, an ecosystem where people start experimenting, creating stuff on this, without you being perhaps exactly like you, Kian, being directly involved. And you help design the system, you put it out there and hope that people come and experiment on it. And this is enabling more experimentation, less like entry barriers, right?
Precisely, yeah.
Hmm.
I can again inject a personal comment. So something that I'm trying to think about these days is what mistakes I made, or either myself or people what mistakes I think we made while
Yeah.
developing Polkadot One, and not repeat them in Jam. So, and
Right.
one of them is actually that I wish to be more involved in application development as a core
Right.
engineer. But that's again on a personal comment. I can't generalize that to others. But I wish to
Yeah.
be more involved in more hands-on with people that are actually building things on Jam from the early days, rather than 2 years down the road, for example.
Well, do you think this would generally benefit the core engineers to think more about the application?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, honestly.
Yeah.
This is more of a personal ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the current fairly honest narrative about Polkadot? It has done an amazing job at tech, but it has fallen behind on like developing great like user experience, or developing business, or explaining what it even is.
Mm-hmm.
And the natural answer response is, okay, like, more core engineers should work on this somewhat non-core things, but maybe then if we do this, our core tech would not be as good. So maybe
Mm.
it's really like this or
Yeah.
that, and you cannot have both.
Trade-off.
Yeah, yeah. It might very well be a trade-off where it's hard to have both, and you have to compromise one. And yeah, I mean, Parity and Polkadot has so far generally opted for two things when it comes to compromises. One is, or trade-offs. One is um, doing things really properly, like not cutting corners when it comes to security, decentralization, actually generating a world with less trust, right? Like, we don't. It would be very hypocritical if we say these things but build systems that
Yeah.
actually don't adhere to
Oh,
that.
that
I
would be
have
unheard of,
the
Kian, in this space in
Ah!
crypto.
But that's the thing. I have really not felt like that working in this company. If anything, I've hinted at it even throughout this conversation, that I think we have definitely made choices that were to our disinterest in the short term, because we were doing
Yeah.
things somewhat properly. But the benefit of this is that myself or everyone else that is in this space hopefully doesn't feel that being, that two-sidedness at all.
Yeah.
Um, and so this is the first, I think, long term, or so far, I think, the trade off that Parity and Polkadot has chosen. And the second one is being technology driven, as in we hope best technology eventually thrives. But
Right.
yeah, that's what
But what?
status quo has been so far. But again, like, when I say that on a personal level, I feel I should be more involved. I wish to be more involved on application level thing. It stems from the fact that I think we need to tilt this balance a little bit. But again, it
Yeah.
shouldn't be like either or, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
last comment on it is also about like where one sees they are best fit. I'm sure there are many engineers in the Polkadot space that are best fitted to continue what they were doing. Whereas I think maybe myself, I'm best suited to do something else in the next iteration of our technology. So again, it's a
Right.
very personal comment.
Right. That's exciting though. So yeah, for you personally, I mean, you might be going into a bit of a different direction, or perhaps learn new things and challenge yourself again, and more in the direction of the application layer stuff.
Indeed, indeed.
I have two questions. One would be like, when are these changes coming for people listening? I'm sure that's not an easy question to answer, but perhaps give a general idea of what we're looking at.
So there's a couple of things that are part of the existing Polkadot that is coming, I guess, like toward by end of the year. I think there's actually ongoing conversation in our governance forums right now about what is the scope of Polkadot 1, 2, and Jam, or should we call it 1, 2, 3, or like whatever. Like, so it's a bit
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
draw the
yeah.
boundaries there. But the things that we should still foresee in the near future is a full unleash of what is named agile core time. So the ability for teams to extend, use existing Polkadot cores in a much easier way. What engineers at Parity and the Fellowship are focusing on still is for the existing Polkadot 1 and whatever is left of it to deliver this like leftover features and make it simpler, make it easier to use for developers. And this comes in many forms. Like it could be better documentation. It could be something like removing a lot of, like for example, we made a lot of things configurable 4 years ago, thinking people are going to build rocket ships, but it turns out most people want a bicycle, like this kind of things. So
Well, I want a rocket ship as well. I
so
mean, do I have to choose?
no, that's a great thing. You can always build the rocket ship, but the analogy that I have, one of our mistakes.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. This is a mistake we
Yeah.
should not repeat in Jam. We gave everyone the blueprint to build a rocket ship before asking them, "Do you want a bicycle or a rocket?" That's
Okay.
we have this thing. We have the blueprint for both. We have always been capable of like providing giving simpler things to people. That's the easier thing, right? For us, like for us, the hard thing was to build the rocket ship. The bicycle is easier.
Right.
But it took us like a long time to realize, okay, people want this thing. And then you have like this snowball effect where it's really hard to go and retroactively fix all the things. So I really hope, and I would do my best to do that in Jam. We should do the opposite, as in start with the simple and build on top of, not the opposite. But a lot of the efforts that are left to do on Polkadot 1 is exactly to fix this aspect, as in provide simpler subsets of the system to people, like be it template, be it tutorial, be it a feature like Agile Core Time, such that people can use the system in an easier way. Because when you think about it, Agile Core Time is also fixing a very similar mistake in that this parachain auctions, they were working on a 6 month basis, but in reality, everyone was bidding for 2 years. So basically, it's exactly the same scenario. Before asking a business how much block space you need, we're like, here's 2 years, just 2 years for you. I mean, or they had to bid for it, of course, but it's very much a similar type of mistake, right? So, I can summarize it like this. So it's the same goal, as in a system should be designed at an API level for other developers, such that it is simple at baseline, and then if you want more complexity, you can always tap into that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
We're repackaging Polkadot 1 in various ways to adhere to this principle, and hopefully Jam will adhere to it from the get-go.
Yeah, it's like to even put it simpler, it's like when you have an app, when you go on Binance or something, and you have beginner mode, or I think there's phones where you have beginner mode and everything is easy on the user interface. Or if you want it more advanced, you can go whatever on advanced mode.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach. Yeah, super interesting response. So when do you think these changes will come?
So the part which is about amending Polkadot 1 to be user friendly and so on, as we speak, or it's already, a lot of it has happened throughout Q1 and Q2 this year, and it would continue for the remainder of this year. And I really hope by the end of this year we're at a position where we can really freeze many things, as in really come to a somewhat of a static ecosystem, again at an API level, such that developers can reliably build and not need to deal with constantly breaking changes. And that's for the Polkadot 1 stuff. As for Jam, so I can only repeat what Gav has said on stage. Also, for maybe a good disclaimer, I am enthusiastically learning about Jam in my free time. I'm now reading the blog posts and talks and whatever, but I have had zero direct contribution to it, as I'm not actively working on it at all. So it's really all just my personal understanding here. So also giving an estimate on how's the development going, or when it would be done and so on, it's very hard to say for me. But I think the estimates from Gav has been that we can expect to see maybe I think the final deadline was 18 months, so maybe end of 2025, I would say, for Jam being launched. So something like a POC, maybe we would see end of this year. But full migration, during which the Polkadot relay chain would be replaced by Jam, maybe late or end of 2025 is a current estimate that I've heard.
Right, right. Okay. And maybe that's a bit of a pivot, but do you know David Goggins?
Oh
Does
yes,
that ring?
yes.
Yeah, I've been watching a little bit of. I watched this podcast with Andrew Huberman. For the people that don't know him, a professor from Stanford, I think, does these scientific podcasts, long episodes, kind of deep dives into studies and all that. And I really enjoyed that episode and this mindset of like doing the hard things, right? So David Goggins is all about doing the hard things. Like you wake up in the morning, do the hard things. He says it sucks, but that's life. You just do the hard things. So I've been kind of this kind of resonated with me, and I've been trying to live by that for a bit. So I was wondering, what are the hard things the Polkadot ecosystem needs to do, right? Like really reflect on this, and I go, what are the hard things the Polkadot ecosystem needs to do to bring value to more people?
Like the hard things that no one wants to do, but they should happen.
Yeah, basically, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
obviously, this is a very broad question because the ecosystem, there's loads of different players, there's developers,
yeah, yeah.
there's whatever, people in marketing and all that. But we talked about how the tech is kind of um, really leading in a sense. It's like
It's
fascinating in
good.
a way.
Yeah,
But then it has to serve a purpose. It has to bring value to people. So how can we get there?
yeah. Maybe I'm a bit my brain, my thinking might be a little bit primed for what
Right.
we've talked about. So I'm going to kind of start where I left off. As in, I think the
Yeah.
first step should come from fellowship and parity tech,
Hmm.
enforcing really like stability. Things have to become stable for people to want to do other things on top of
Hmm.
Polkadot as it stands. I think once we're at that stage, what I wish to see more is once the core tech is more stable, for
Hmm.
more people to mm, find solutions to problems that everyone thinks is unsolvable. It's a bit of a convoluted statement. I would unpack it right now. I
Yeah.
hear either directly firsthand or through people that are kind of have a deep understanding of the system, that a lot of the complexities that our builders are dealing with are actually problems that are solvable. It's just that no one really like kind of knows how to, or no one knows that the solution exists. So you have this
Mm.
situation where builder A goes to builder B and is like, do you know this thing is not possible on
Ah,
Polkadot? And then builder B is like, oh yeah, I've heard something similar, so it must be true. So he goes and talks to builder C, and then this like just circulates. Whereas actually that first problem that started this whole conversation was solvable. So I
all
think
right.
we are seeing too much of that. I think this is one of the things that's holding us back, and we're seeing too much of it. Again, it's a collaborative thing. I think at Parity and Polkadot at a fellowship level, we need to really, really enforce stability. But we should also then hope, I would wish to see the ecosystem also coming out of this mindset and looking at the pain points that we have again from first principles and seeing if they're actually solvable. I believe many of them are solvable.
Can I double click on that? Are you
Yeah.
saying that the problem has been solved, but the diffusion of this knowledge is not happening effectively across the network of people, or?
It's like someone knows how to solve it, but no one knows who that person is or how to find
Yeah.
them.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like we see this a lot with like XCM related thing. I think composing XCM programs is and sending this cross-chain messages has been something of a somewhat of a confusion point for many point. I'm not an expert myself. This is one of those secondhand things that I hear, but I hear from people that are actually experts that like many of these things are solvable, and I try to like shout that it is solvable, but it's hard to overcome that overall sentiment being just one voice among the many. Yes, so I really also then hope to see on top of this stable bedrock more standard and or two things like more great good UIs and like tools that help our end users. I think our end
Hmm.
users have really had a hard time, dealing with like uh, very less so nowadays, but in the old days, like dealing with like Polkadot.js apps and this like very hardcore wallets that are like working on
Mm.
top of IPFS and like are using light clients and all the data is being
Yeah.
fetched on chain and there's no indexing and so on. That is one. And then finally, or that's one aspect. And the last thing that comes to mind is standards. So I think there are really like some challenges that are unique to Polkadot. I'll put it this way. We have a
Mm-hmm.
multi-chain network, so there's a lot of chains just around, and they all want to talk to each other because there is interoperability. And as we talked about earlier, interoperability in Polkadot is one of the sweet spots in that you can like do it in a good way. You can, to a very high extent, trust the interaction that you have with your other chain. So one of the selling points of Polkadot is that it's good for interoperability. If you're a parachain, you're
Mm-hmm.
encouraged to like open channels to everyone and so on. But then
Mm-hmm.
what becomes difficult is that, so you have all these chains, they all want to talk to each other, but we also give everyone this toolkit of upgradability. So everyone is like constantly upgrading themselves and like things are very much fluid. And the only solution that comes to my mind about this is standards. Like I wish to see like more teams coming up with standards and actually propagating them within the ecosystem teams. I think this is a
Yeah.
great example of something that was never part of my duties to do as like, a core engineer working on Polkadot protocol in parity, but I wish I could actually help with it. And I to this day think it's a problem worth being solved. Like a perfect standard for like different tokens living in different parachains and how do you move them around. If anything, XEM is to some extent an answer to this. XEM is like a language to send instructions around and let different chains with different runtimes communicate with each other. But there's many other either analogous technologies needed or additions to XCM needed to make it general enough. So more standards to facilitate cross-chain interactions. That's something else. I'm glad we
Gotcha.
talked about this because it's really again a good example of a type of problem
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of I itch to go and solve, but I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
no, it's not it's not my mission right now. I
Yeah.
kind of have to like it's a drastic change for me, it's not part of Parity's mission statement per se to like fix these issues. It's more like build the core Polkadot protocol, at least to
Right.
at some points. I mean, there were points in time where this boundary of what is Parity's responsibility and what is not was fuzzy, and I think there was always like
Right.
some let's say it was a point of heated conversations and conflict, but we can at least agree on one thing, that the primary mission of Parity is to develop the Polkadot protocol, not
Mm.
like less so there's high level things like a standard for applications to be able to easily talk to each other.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha. What do you think could bring the next wave of users, perhaps, to Polkadot? Is that something you have been thinking about? Um, yeah. What's your take on this?
I
Yeah.
think we need a mix of two things. We need a mix of use cases that are, or basically one thing, we need use cases that are very difficult to implement in other networks for various reasons, be it throughput, be it lack of shared security, so on and so forth, and then see them on Polkadot. I think that's where we need to find, or
Mm.
we hope to see a use case that can really, really be done on Polkadot. Or the opposite is that it's being really, really done poorly on another network. I
Right.
think that's one aspect, or that's one catalyst that can really uh, bring Polkadot to flourishing.
Yeah. Are you
Now,
seeing some concepts that you find interesting? Some use cases that come to mind?
the main things that I can think of is a mix of throughput and shared security. Like, as in, we can have very high throughput while maintaining shared security. And
Mm.
my gut feeling is that really, like, this will be a bottleneck for many
Mm.
applications, other networks. But this is something that I have a comment on this that is kind of like it's difficult for me to put it out because I think there because why are we not seeing these limitations on other networks? Because everything is being done optimistically, and so long as
Mm.
there's no like kind of black swan event or like some negative catalyst, no one cares about these security properties. So I'm not
Mm.
saying I wish to see a meltdown elsewhere so that people realize Polkadot is actually good, but truth
Mm.
is there is a little bit of truth to that. I think so long as there is no reason for people to care about security, no one
Yeah.
will care about security.
Yeah.
It's the same, and I mean, you keep hearing things like, I love this phrase, like internet was designed by, I don't know, like, um, I forgot. I think maybe the word was hippies or something. I don't know. Like, by
Yeah.
people who are very like open in that everyone's gonna be benevolent. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's gonna do good. Like, there's
Everyone's
those.
gonna hold their hands and sing kumbaya and
Yeah, like everyone has good intentions and so
yeah,
on. And I mean, like a couple of decades later, I mean, we actually managed to build like all sorts of systems on top of it. But
mm,
yeah, the main premise of Web3 is that we shouldn't like. Let me put it this way: I think if we continue building this like half-baked, semi-secure, multi-sig based rollups and call that, oh, we're scaling Web3, it's very similar to how like the existing internet is. Like, it's still based
yeah,
on you're assuming good things will happen. I mean, if you're assuming good things will happen, I mean, the Amazon servers and the already existing internet was pretty good. I
yeah.
don't even know what we're doing here. So yeah, I think that's, anyways, those are my thoughts on how Polkadot can stand out in among other ecosystems.
Right. Well, lovely. Thank you so much, Kian. That was super interesting, and yeah, I learned a lot. Is there something you'd like to say just to wrap this up? Any last words?
No, thanks for having me. It was, as anticipated, useful to sort of put these thoughts
Yeah,
out there. I do wish to write them down and as like a somewhat of a longish blog post or maybe like a 20-minute talk. I think I say a lot of things, but I need to find the right narrative between
yeah,
them when it comes to like the things we talked about today.
yeah.
But this was a good exercise for me as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think so. There were like glimpses of recaps and sentences where I felt like you really condensed it down to as few words as possible. You know, that
Yeah,
sort of thing when you write and rewrite and you get the essence of what you're trying to say down to fewer words on the page.
exactly. Exactly.
So hopefully this episode will help you with that. I'll be on the lookout for that blog post,
Yeah.
and I'll definitely read it. We'll repost it, and yeah, I mean, happy to have you on the show. On the show anytime again. Thank you for coming on the show,
All
and
right.
let's stay in touch.
Thank you very much.